Hello, welcome. I am Ankur Patel, Director of Advancement for Hindu University of America. Can you hear me clearly, Kalyanji? Are you there? Yeah,
Yes,
we got
I
our
can hear
guests
you.
and panelists on, just dealing with some minor technical issues. I hope everyone was able to log on easily and correctly. Our first text message that went out had the Zoom link for last week's webinar. I just corrected that. But we're doing these weekly webinars on so many different topics, usually trying to get information about HUA, our courses out there. But today's topic is Dharma Wiki. You know, I was born here and I've used Wikipedia for all sorts of things. And I didn't know how much Hindu dvesha there was in it until I started working with and for Hindu University of America. The content on Wikipedia and all over the internet is not accurate. There's so many misconceptions. They always trying to put caste as the foundational issue of all of Hinduism. And it's important for us to have a space like this to discuss these issues. It's important for us to have an institution like Hindu University of America that's bringing up the Hindu, the Dharmic perspective and championing it. We're doing these weekly webinars on Saturday mornings. We had almost 400 people register for this one. If you think this is important, please share it out. Let your friends and your family and other people know that we're doing this work. Share it out. Get more people to participate. Even if you can't take a course, come to our free webinars. And thank you for being on today for this important webinar on Dharma Wiki. We got three great panelists today. Let me first introduce Dr. Ashish Pandey. He's an associate professor at the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai. His research areas are spirituality in management, yoga, and positive psychology, and the interface between business and society. He's earned many awards for his research and has more than 30 research papers, many in leading international journals and periodicals like Journal of Management, Journal of Business Ethics, and Business Ethics European Review, and also the Pfeiffer Annual of Training and Consulting, Social Responsibility Journal, and so many more. Dr. Ashish Pandey, thank you for being on today and your work on Dharma Wiki. And we also have Professor Ganesh Ramakrishnan, who's currently serving as a professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in IIT Bombay, Mumbai also. His areas of research include human-assisted machine learning, symbolic representation in machine learning, and computational linguistics in Indian languages. His work has resulted in several startups and over 90 publications in peer-reviewed conferences and journals. He's received awards such as the IBM Faculty Award and others from Qualcomm, Microsoft, Adobe Research, and the IIT Bombay Impactful Research Award. He's also held the J.R. Isaac Chair at IIT Mumbai. And we also have Srimati Kanakavali Santanam, sorry about that. I guess we just added a special guest. Thank you for being on. And of course, we have President of Hindu University of America, Sri Kalyan Vishwanathan, who's gonna maybe give a better introduction of what we're about here today and what this webinar is. Kalyanji, let me hand it over to you. Thank you for leading the way in this important intersectional institution of Hindu University of America, guiding wonderful people like our panelists to this space, and then giving us your vision and perspective. Kalyanji.
Okay, terrific, everybody. We have 116 odd participants, so it's really wonderful to have you all. Let me put a little question into the chat box for everybody. Where are you logging in from? Okay, that's the question. Where are you right now? Just type a city name. That should be good. Hamburg, okay. Atlanta, okay. New York, Colorado Springs, Mumbai, San Ramon, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Santa Rosa, Sunnyvale. Right, great. Terrific. So we've got a fantastic audience from many different places. I'm going to ask one more question in the chat window. Okay. and that is, if you are a student of the MA Sanskrit program at HUA, please say yes. Just say yes, okay? If you're a student in the MA Sanskrit program, just say yes. Okay, I want to see if anybody has joined. Okay, Jagadishwar Bondugula, got you? All right, anybody else? Okay, don't say no, please. Okay, you'll fill up the chat box with no's. Just say yes if you are a student. All right, good. So great. So there is just one person. So you're going to have to be the ambassador for your entire community. Now, I want to introduce today's topic with the with this background. I don't know about you. Like Ankur said, spoke earlier. There have been many times when I've gone to Wikipedia, got into some particular detailed subject matter pertaining to Hinduism, Hindu Dharma, and encountered some statement, and then immediately had a reaction saying, "My God, that is so wrong. That is so absurd," or "I don't know what to do about it. This is so frustrating." I mean, and they keep going on and on with so many mistakes and misleading representations in Wikipedia. Now, I came to know that a small group of people in Mumbai IIT had made an effort to contest what was on Wikipedia. In fact, they went in and started making changes, but their changes were not accepted. They were rebuffed. They were disallowed, and whatever change they made was reverted back to the original. And it took a while for them to begin to recognize that this is not going to work out. We can't, even though it's an open platform, it's a heavily censored open platform, even though it has the appearance of an open platform. Well, what did they do? They got together and they came up with a proposal for an alternate platform. And I'm very pleased to share with you today the story of the origin and journey of this alternate platform called Dharma Wiki, a source of information from a Dharmic perspective that is still in the very early stages of development. Okay, they've got a head start, they've done some work, but there's a lot more to do. So this is a platform that belongs to all of us, to the Hindu community at large, and Bombay IIT and the two professors who are represented here today, they in some sense are the custodians of this effort. And from Hindu University of America's perspective, I'm very happy to share that we are partnering with them in some small way, and hopefully in a growing way, and we will really make a difference in developing and expanding this platform. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to invite Ashish ji and Ganesh ji to take the conversation over from here. One small request to everybody: if you have a question that comes up for you during the webinar, please type it into the Q&A box. The Q&A box. Okay. So we're not going to pick up questions from the chat box. In the Q&A box, we'll pick up questions towards the end. Okay, and Ganeshji, if you can, and Kanakavalli, if you can kindly, open your video cameras, we'll be able to see you as well. With that, over to you, Ashishji. Take it from here. You have to unmute, okay?
Ganeshji started this project and is technologically and intellectually leading it. I'll request Ganeshji to share his experience with which he encountered with the other team members in our scholars community who are interested in the Dharmic tradition and the knowledge tradition in our culture. So I'll request Ganeshji to start this discussion. And Kanagwalaji, you may please share the PPT.
Sure, sir.
Namaste everyone. Thank you, Kalyanji, for your very very open-hearted invitation to everyone here to be on this forum, and also for your generous introduction. I work in the area of artificial intelligence and machine learning, as was introduced earlier on. I deal a lot with Wikipedia. We use Wikipedia extensively, and I was always fascinated by the wiki structure, the kind of moderated democracy it brings to content creation. However, several years back, inspired by very erudite scholars, we thought, let's try and bring a lot more scholarship to the Wikipedia articles on Sanatan Dharma, on the Vedic tradition. So we as a group, faculty and students, would sit and read books and then try and create articles that could probably replace or be refinements of existing articles on Wikipedia. And that's when we were totally shocked, because even well-meant, well-curated, well-researched content got blocked, edits got reverted, and edits got reverted very systematically overnight. I don't want to get into all the details of what all happened then, but in summary, we were totally aghast by the way the so-called intellectual democracy in Wikipedia was actually an illusion. The wiki, however, is very attractive. So wiki does allow, the wiki structure is open source, and wiki does allow for talks and discussions on every article. So we tried engaging in discussions, and some of the accounts were of course blocked. We realized that if I were to edit an article on machine learning, or I were to edit an article on Bollywood, I don't take too much interest, but I have friends who do take interest. You'll be basically unharmed. Your articles could probably go ahead, as long as you're trying to at least be faithful to what that stream says. But you touch an article on several topics. If you can go back to the previous slides, the slide two slides back, Kanakavalli. We found that there are certain things that there's a very strong bias against. There's a gender bias. Now, this is not an article from us. This is coming from a third party. There are articles, there's a bias against underrepresented communities. And then there's a myth of global languages is largely in English, and basically English-oriented knowledge sources. So if while writing an article on Rigveda, you cite Max Muller, you're welcome. But then you start citing some of the literature in Hindi, you're scorned upon. So so we realized that we were not alone. There were many others who had similar plight. However, for us, it was not just about creating another Wikipedia, right? We thought, well, let's look for existing efforts which we tried to create alternatives to Wikipedia, but were built on wiki structure. And unfortunately, we found that well, while Wikipedia is very popular for several reasons, its primary source for a preliminary insight into any topic, its reliability perceived to be more than that of Facebook or tweet. So we found that, well, there are some other wiki-based sites, and we tried and invited them to be to form a larger group, a consortium. If you can pause at this, Kanakvalli. So, the idea is, if they built on the wiki structure where anyone could create new articles, anyone can edit existing articles, the history is maintained of every article, its edits, so that over a period of time, articles become richer, no article gets fossilized. So these were very attractive for us, but we somehow found that the alternatives to Wikipedia for Dharma-related causes, for representing Shastra, were somehow not matching all these criteria. For example, they were not open. There were maybe handful, one or two who are, they're still running, they're maintained, and there's a very very strong barrier, entry barrier. Nobody else can enter actually. So that's when we realized that we need an alternative where scholars could be engaged. It doesn't become one man's or one institution's blogging site. If you're hosting a wiki and not letting, creating a moderating platform uh, for articles and let the articles be revised, then you might as well run a blog. So we wanted to exploit the full structure of wiki, and therefore we said, well, let's create a wiki. But now creating a new wiki without creating rules of moderation is pretty much useless. What we found that in Wikipedia, the discussions, as Kanakavali is showing a page here, as the history, for example, the talks and the discussions would typically hit the wall, and the wall is the point of view or the neutral point of view. So if you're citing Max Muller, then you're being neutral. But if you're citing a Hindi commentary coming from a scholar in the Vedic tradition, it would probably not be counted as a neutral point of view. Most often, the original sources, the original verse from where the entire article got curated is totally missing. So that's when we curated. Kanakavali can proceed. We said, well, let's create a point of view which actually is representative of how Shastras have evolved. We have had Shrutis, we have had Smritis. How did Smriti Shastras come into being? How did, if you can go to the Dharma point of view, Kanakavali, please. So if Kautilya Artha Shastra came into existence, what were the norms that he adhered to, right? So how did Charaka Samhita, right? How did it come into being? And we found that many of these Smriti Shastras had themselves subject the Shastra to several very time-tested principles. So Tantra Yukti, what you see on the right-hand bottom corner is something that we have a very elaborate page in Dharma Wiki on Tantra Yukti, and most scholars are very familiar with this concept. On deeper study, we found that, well, Tantra Yukti is what also underlies a lot of modern research, or several principles from Tantra Yukti underlie modern research. For example, literature review, understanding the other person's point of view. What we some of us are familiar with as Purva Paksha and Uttara Paksha form a part of Tantra Yukti. But then Tantra Yukti, there are sometimes some of these treatises talk about 32, sometimes 36. You're welcome to go to the page and visit yourself. We'll probably do it sometime during the course of this discussion. The second is Parikshanam, that we are able to verify whatever is being written. Verify with respect to the original source. Okay, so the original Sanskrit verse becomes absolutely important for any point we make in Dharma Wiki. That's the second pillar of Dharma point of view. The third pillar is integral unity of Sanatana Dharma. What are you trying to establish? Are you trying to create the Shat Darshanas as a battleground, or are these Shat Darshanas giving you complementary points of view which make sure that there is completeness? There's a completeness to any topic that is presented. The third is fourth is non-translatability. Kanakavali, can you please stick to that? Yeah. So non-translatability, which is Dharma cannot be translated into religion. It doesn't mean anything when you start translating words. Mukti becomes liberation. Again, you lose your ground. Right? So non-translatability, of course, there's a recent book by Mr. Rajiv Malhotra on this topic. And we have, of course, maintained our own list of non-translatables thanks to many scholarly inputs. And finally, towards diligence. Now, we started creating articles, and what Kanakavali will show some examples how this Dharma point of view reflects in the kind of articles we have, which contrast against what Wikipedia has to offer. We also had some more corollaries of this Dharma point of view, which Kanakavali flashed in the previous slide. Can you go back to the scope of the Can you go? Yeah. Sampradaya Siddha Vishaya, Purushartha Drishti. So there, the whole idea of Sampradaya is actually very is very complementary to the Shruti Shastra. The Sampradayas are there to strengthen the transmission of the Shruti Shastra in a in a contextually relevant way. Purushartha Drishti, Bharatiya scholarly view. So these were like corollaries of the Dharma point of view. And let's go through examples of how the Dharma point of view reflects in the quality of pages. Kanakavali can proceed. We'll just flash some examples. Kanakavali, can you proceed to the next slide? So, Kanakavali, can you proceed to the next slide, please?
Sir, I'm on the next slide.
Okay.
I'm on
So
Ayurveda right now.
Here's an example of Ayurveda. You'll find Wikipedia describes Ayurveda as pseudoscientific, a proto-science, an unscientific or trans-science system. Now, if you limit Ayurveda only to the physical realm, very unfortunately, this is where the analysis converges. Obviously, it's not only restricted to the physical realm. This analysis itself has carried a very strong agenda, as you can see. Whereas, if you are trying to emphasize the integral point of view, integral unity of Sanatan Dharma, the fact that you don't view a person just as body, but there is Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vayu Khammano Buddhi Revacha Ahankara Ityam me Bhinna Prakriti Ashtada. There is Ashtada Prakriti. So you see, Ayurveda cannot be equated with conventional medicine science, since the modern medical science deals with diagnosis and management of diseases affecting only a physical body or mind, whereas Ayurveda focuses on health of an individual who's not merely a physical body or mind, but a union of body, mind, and life energy. And this reflects in the kind of treatment you give to a terminally ill patient. Ayurveda talks about strengthening the mental condition of a person as well. Shat darshanas. Right? Again, I mentioned about how Wikipedia poses a battlefield between the Shat darshanas, diverse philosophies significantly disagreeing with each other. I mean, it just brings pain to the heart of someone who has invested a significant part of his or her life in understanding Shastra. But here you go to the right. It is remarkable. This is what Dharmawiki has. It's remarkable that with the exception of the Charvaka materialists and all other systems, they agree on the existence of fundamental concepts. So there are many concepts which they agree upon. And that's the foundation of the Shat Darshana. Okay, so if you can move to more examples. So you'll see this also reflects sometimes in contemporary narratives on the lives of personalities like Shivaji Maharaj and so on. This it's a concept of Varnashram Dharma. Now, again, the Wikipedia analysis of Varna to caste system, communities. Whereas if you go to Mahabharata, if you go to the Shruti Shastras, Varna is often mostly talked about as principles. The principles of Varna, as you can see here, and ashrama are founded upon the principles of Purushartha. And in the Anushasana Parva, this is what Bhishma Pitamaha tells Yudhishthira, that there was a time, na rajyam na raja asit, na cha dandikaha, dharmeneva praja sarvam, rakshati isma parasparam. So there was a time when there was no need of a particular system. Why? Because people were following the Swadharma. Systems can come into being in a very contextual manner. They evolve. But totally reducing Varna to a system is complete insult to the entire knowledge repository that the Vedas are, right? And moksha and so on. We can skip these slides in the interest of time. Now, there have been several different types of articles or categories of articles that have manifested based on this principle. Of course, the idea is just that we integrate traditional scholars' views and so on. The articles are now very nicely organized into a very rich taxonomy, which Wiki offers. And as Kanakavali will show, this has resulted in articles on temples. We have a very large database of temples on Wikipedia, on Dharmawiki. We have articles which are about the education system. How can this rich knowledge repository manifest in articles that create guidelines for parents and teachers in the current context? So we have, if we can show the yeah. So there's an effort to integrate the knowledge system of Gurukuls into Dharma Wiki. More specifically, we have Srimati Rishchala. She's been working, she and Kanakavali have been working very recently on working closely with Gurukulas for manifesting the entire mathematics, right? How the Purushartha Drishti reflected in the way mathematics was taught, how mathematics was taught in a way that complemented and often enriched a student's knowledge of other fields, including Yajna, right? How Dharma was at the foundation of math. Nishala ji, can you please flash the slides where you give an overview of the kind of educational content that has been created. So Dharmawiki has many fundamental articles on concepts. There are a large category of articles in English and Hindi, which are meant to provide guidelines for teachers and parents alike in educating, bringing up the next generation. So Nishala, over to Nishala ji and the slides there. Therein.
Yeah, namaste. I'm Nischala here. Yes, we've been doing some great work here at Dharmawiki in association with the Gurukulas, and the kind of activities include working on education system primarily. And this is to develop and restructure the curriculum that is presently in vogue. And for that, we have adopted some methodologies, I should say, primarily integrating the older or the ancient texts with the modern and current system of education, such that we can include even the we can go take it along together so that the student gets exposure to the ancient texts and the modern ways of experimentation, research methodologies, and systems of research, I should say. So with that in mind, we had started working on the mathematics. We had started working in many areas, I should say. Mathematics is one of them. So Bharatiya Jeevan Pratiman and Punaruthan Vidyapit Foundation, we had taken their methodology of education system, which was presented to promote the Bharatiya Jeevana Vidhan, I should say. So it highlights all the methods of studies and education that had been there in the past Gurukula systems. So the Valiji, can you just put on the aims of the Gurukula system article, please? So with that, like how did the Gurukula system progress in all these centuries, holding on to the oral tradition and yet have such a great legacy that we have today. So this is our article on this is one of the pages of Dharma Wiki, wherein we compiled how the Gurukula system works and why we are taking their mode of work and their methodology of teaching. It is mainly to impart all the Dharmic principles along with the Shastric version, and there was no dearth of experimentation and research for a student, even in those days. Though there is a great myth in the present days that when we talk about this, it is called as a mythology or a myth, which we would like to dispel. So here we see that Sikshavalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad has already given us important duties of the student, and this is the convocation address, and it is famous. I mean, it's quite prevalent where all the rules have been laid out in the study of the Vedas itself and the Swadhyaya. So imparting the Dharmic principles and character building was one of the main main forte of our education system. So all of these kind of values, a value-based education system was prevalent in those days and times. We did have quite a few methods to discipline the student, and even though they are quite contrary to the present day system, it had promoted and given us a personality development for the student. So with this kind of a background of the Gurukula system, you can see that there is self-confidence was instilled, research or a life skill mindset was introduced to the student. They were taught about self-restraint and discrimination, and all these kind of things were included within the chores, their daily duties, their social activities. All this was such a primary feature. So the student had learned um, all the um, all the shastric um, knowledge, or the jnana was obtained even by doing his daily activities or in the natural way of life. But the present education system is totally exam based and curriculum based, and that is also like how Professor Ganesh was saying previously about Rajiv Malhotra ji writing about Sanskrit non-translatables, or all the other articles that we see around, bringing to the light that these have to be moved away from. This indoctrination has to be moved away from, and we need to bring back our traditional way of life and our traditional association with the nature. Yes, Valiji, we can go back to the slides again. So with this kind of a background, we had started working on putting together the mathematical texts. And for that, we took Leelavati as our foundational text. It was written by Bhaskaracharya in the 11th century, the 10th and 11th century. So it is important that we understand how the system was presented, which had a lot of style of presentation was quite delightful, I should say, and it also had inculcated the life skill mindset. We want to take the child's mind away from the decolonization mindset. So starting from the class one or the grade one, a student is, a student is introduced to all the natural ways of learning mathematics, along with, you have a combination of poetry, real life problems, like the everyday skills of a blacksmith, a carpenter, or a poet. You have combination of all the chandas. All these kind of things are dealt with at an early stage. So the child gets used to such kind of a presentation, and they are triggered to inculcate the algorithmic approach of the Indian mathematics, which is extremely unique in this whole world, and it has created it was one of the most important advances for the world's civilization to develop. So with this background, we had taken into account even other texts such as Ganita Sara Sangraha written by Mahavira Acharya. There were a lot of Jain and Buddhist texts also, which had contributed greatly to the development of mathematical sciences. Vedanga Jyotishya, the astronomical work by Lagada, had really shown such deep insights. The very Vedas, the Taittiriya Samhita, where we see the Rudra, Namaka, Chamaka, where the numbers, the numeral system had been laid out. The place and the decimal system had been given to us. Even in the Vedic era, the numbers such as 3309 was spelled out very clearly. So such large numbers, 2 crores and 10, to the power of 10 power 23 had already been described. 10 power 17 had already been described. Even though we see minor variations in all these kind of presentations by different scientists and I should say mathematicians, the Ganitagnyas. It was one of the the greatest progress that mankind has ever made. And we can see that this Jyotisha in the Vedas. Jyotisha is actually it's a kind of a misnomer, I should say. We say that Jyotisha is a more contemporary to astrology rather than astronomy. But in the ancient texts, it mostly referred to Jyotisha, referred to astronomy or the science of the planetary bodies. So their velocities had been calculated, and their, everything had been laid out, the seasons, the ayanas, the Vishuats, the parvas, and they had yajnas at different parvas. So all this kind of information was required for their own life cycle, where yajnas were given the primary importance. So to know when to do what was the primary goal of such Vedanga Jyotisha, from where we see that Ganita had already been a developed science, though it was given a different name. So the solar years were defined, the kalpas were defined, time was such a great sense, in the sense it was cyclical time rather than the linear time that we see in the present day Gregorian calendar systems. So with this kind of a background that we already had, there were many texts actually through the Aryabhatiya, when the concept of zero had come in even prior by Pingala in the Chandra Shastra. The grammarians had given the concept of Panini's grammar had already dealt with the concept or notion of zero or shunya. So this kind of knowledge had transmitted even prior to the Christian era, had already started. So this had been such a hallmark, and we would like to, in the present day situation, educate the child about such information, tuning them to adapt this kind of knowledge in their daily lives, use it for their own understanding. So this was the primary reason why we started working on this curriculum content to a greater extent. When we have written on the Dharmawiki site also, we find a lot of efforts towards understanding how each subject, the Arthashastra or the economics, and Ganita or Krishi Vignan, or the hydrology or irrigation, mineralogy, all these kinds of shastras had already developed to a great extent, which we could now progress further. So for example, there is more research needed for making alloys. So this kind of research can be given to the child or the student who comes in at the university level. So she or he has been trained mentally to accept it and then work further using this. So this is the reason why we had worked extensively. Even we plan to work extensively to revive the Gurukulas and promote and improve the Guru Parampara. We have started trying to integrate this so that the Indian values are built in from the very grassroots level. I just hand it over back to Ganesh.
Yeah. Namaste. Thanks, Tishlaji, for giving a glimpse into one of these initiatives. I must acknowledge that this entire mathematical curriculum development up to grade 8 is being done very closely in collaboration and with the support of Agastya Curriculum. Now, it's an appeal that other Gurukulas which are trying to come up with their curriculum, we can have close collaboration. Not only that, you could have volunteers, you could have people who are also compensated for their work, and people who compensate for their work. All of them, there are different ways you can participate, because we need to also take care of those who spend their 24 hours thinking about this topic, even if they're writing for only 8 to 10 hours a day. So the other thing I wanted to highlight is, when we plunged into this this concrete example of math curriculum, you may wonder why not start with the postgraduate level. Well, actually speaking, if you go through Lilavati, the way things flow in the curriculum develops in our traditional system is very different. So there's a kind of grooming required. And even if I want to latch on to this today, it will be nice if I understand the sequence in which the concepts are meant to be assimilated. So it's an invitation. Can we do this for all other topics? Metallurgy, chemistry, physics, all right? And I know there are many nice, well-meant people who have written very advanced textbooks. How do you translate that, all those texts into stepwise, consumable, and actionable, uh, knowledge points, right? So it's an invitation. I must also say that up to grade 7 in general, we have in Hindi a complete curriculum also, which of course needs to be built out in great details, as like we're doing for mathematics. This is an example. It's our hope that this can also help revive and rejuvenate the entire Gurukula system, because our strong belief is unless there is a framework for writing and compiling and collaborating on Smriti, even at some point of time, we'll find that the knowledge system or the effort at trying to revitalize Gurukulas might suffer a setback, because there's no such platform for collaboration. All Gurukulas have to complement and work together at some point of time. At this point, I would like to hand the podium back to Professor Ashish Pandey.
Dhanyavad Ganeshji and Nishalaji. Through the Dharma Wiki platform, we also wish to juxtapose and compare the traditional versus traditional and the contemporary knowledge. It is not versus at many places. So our effort is to build the to articulate the traditional knowledge, at the same time, wherever possible, giving the comparison with the traditional knowledge, giving the comparison of the traditional knowledge with the contemporary knowledge, and also at some places, if the synthesis is possible, we are open for that, and content related to that is also there in the Dharma Wiki. So, idea is that there are many scholars in working in many universities, and many of them are aware about or inspired to look at the traditional knowledge system, but they do not have the information properly curated and systematically presented in the anywhere, because they have to look at the different books and different resources, whereas Dharma Wiki provides the integral resources, an integrated resource for the research scholars. That's why we ensure that all the articles in the Dharma Wiki are given based on proper references. Complete references are given with each article, and in all the places, the very due acknowledgement is done for the scholars from where whose work has been the basis of the of a particular article. So this all effort is to encourage the researchers and the scholars to use the available information in a wiki form, and wiki form is very similar to the integrated view of the Indian knowledge system, because Indian knowledge system is also very integrated. Here you see psychology, physiology, sociology related aspects are very well integrated and given in the given in our text. So Dharma Wiki produces a glimpse of, or to some extent reproduces that kind of experience. So next, next please. If we look at the traditional knowledge, it can specifically help in 3 ways. And if we take a pragmatic stance or more application orientation, then traditional knowledge wisdom suddenly gives us a perspective of looking at things. Life can be looked at as a materialistic thing. Life can be looked at as social reality. Life can be looked at as the manifestation of one consciousness. These are the fundamental ontological assumptions. And likewise, what is the relationship between nature and man? This is also subjected to fundamental ontological assumptions. what is the notion of self? Now we can say self is conative, affective, and cognitive as it is defined in the modern psychology. But traditional system also talks about the energy system or pranamaya kosh. It says that fundamental level of consciousness is not wakefulness on which the whole psychology theories are developed, but the fundamental basis of the consciousness is, and experience of consciousness is turiya, the fourth one. So there are some fundamental differences in the perspective, and traditional knowledge system gives the different perspective, and that opens up huge opportunity for research. In some of the traditional system, it is already happening. For example, Chinese medicine system has been to some extent used in the contemporary research. In the psychology, the notion of subjective vitality comes from the basis of the traditional knowledge about chi or chai. Likewise, perspective can inform the new knowledge creation, which is more integrative and holistic. There are lots and lots of new constructs. The construct is a word to capture otherwise a complex social reality. So a lot of constructs are there in our tradition, which Rajiv Malhotra ji say are untranslatable. Some of you have also mentioned this this in the question and answer box, that there are certain terms which are non-translatable. They are non-translatable, but there is a great opportunity for dialogue and spreading the knowledge by explaining them, maybe in the English language and other languages. So our language and our shastras are replete with so many constructs. I'm just giving example: Shraddha, Vivek, Tap. Means list is infinite. So a lot of constructs. For example, doshas, Ayurveda doshas, they are also constructs. If you go and try to figure out exactly where is the pitta and what is the pitta, it is the reflection of pitta. Some symptoms have the reflection of pitta, but exactly you can't pinpoint. So there are lots and lots of construct which can be developed, which needs to be developed if we have to build our knowledge system. And those are mentioned in the Dharma Wiki. There are, as Nishchalaji mentioned, there are a lot of readily available knowledge base available in the traditional literature on Ayurveda, on Krishi Vigyan. So that knowledge system also needs to be presented. If required, if possible, it has to be juxtaposed with the modern knowledge system. Many a time, it can enlighten the modern knowledge system, contemporary knowledge system. But until and unless someone puts in an effort to juxtapose both the knowledge systems, it will be difficult for the common man to appreciate the depth and the relevance of the traditional knowledge system or our Indian knowledge system or Dharmic knowledge. We also need to have case studies, comparative research, in order to propagate this knowledge and make the modern mind ready to dwell deeper into the Dharmic perspective and Dharmic knowledge. Anyway, the Indian epistemology has been very robust, and that is being used in the form of Tantra Yukti in many of our texts. So there is a need to present those ideas in the language which is understandable most easily by the contemporary scholars and students. That's why it is in English, but we hope that as the knowledge progresses, people will become well versed with at least 2, if not 3 or 4 languages, and easily move from the English to Sanskrit or their mother tongue to communicate to the world and present their ideas. These are some of the examples, like yoga and the 4 paths, how they are connected to the modern management, and what are the research agendas and the insights about the 4 paths of yoga. Articles are there of this kind. Next, please. Or articles related to yoga and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence as a term appeared only in last 50 years in the literature. but something like emotional intelligence is already there in the yoga literature. So we need to juxtapose this. These are some other examples wherein what is being talked about in the yoga is very much similar to, and probably more in depth, what is being currently talked about in the positive psychology. So there are articles like these. Yoga and Ayurveda, well-being is a big concern of current time. We all know that the number of suicide has been already surpassed the total number of the deaths being caused by accident, war, etc. So the well-being is a big concern, but what is the well-being? It is in the contemporary literature, it is defined as a hedonistic and eudaimonic well-being. But what is our understanding? What is the yogic and Ayurvedic understanding? How the hedonic and eudaimonic are well integrated? These kind of insights are given in our tradition, in the Dharmic tradition, and articles are there mentioning these kind of things. Next, please. Kanakvali, I think in the interest of time, you can also mention about some of the articles related to the agriculture, Ayurveda, etc. That will give our friends some insight about what all work has gone into it. There is a lot needs to be done. The whole course curriculum can be put up here. And there are some wonderful things happening in some of the Gurukuls in terms of, as Nishalaji and Ganesh are putting up content related to the mathematics mathematics teaching. And it is not only concept. We need to put up the coursework because concepts require appropriate pedagogy. So that's why the instruction design has to be put up, which can justify the concept with the appropriate pedagogy, which was there in our tradition. Eventually, we need to work on the ontology and epistemology as well, because those are the fundamental spheres through which a new paradigm or fresh paradigmatic conversation can be started. Whatever has happened till now in the Dharma Wiki is just the beginning, but whatever is there to make people interested and at least inquisitive about the traditional knowledge system or Dharmic knowledge system, that is being done to some extent by the wonderful team we have. Kanakvalli is one of the very bright scholars we are fortunate to have in our team. Now she will explain some of the articles related to the different knowledge systems which are emerging from the Dharmic perspective.
Thank you, sir. So basically, I would like to take you through a quick view of the site, how it is organized, and what is the different categories under which work is happening. So if you see the banner, this will be visible in the homepage of the website as well. So in broad, the categories have been divided as Vedas, Vedanta, education-related articles, Dharmas, Shastras, the articles in Hindi, Yajnas, temples, and some other categories. So beginning with Veda Vedangas, which is the traditional Indian knowledge base, that is given in the Vedas category. Moving on to philosophy, we go into Vedanta. Then elaborating on action-based or duty-based concepts, we have the Dharma category. Then we have the science and technology related articles in the Shastras category, which also include not just Shastras like Ayurveda, but also the modern ones, more related to the modern ones like mathematics in comparison with the modern science, mathematics, agriculture, etc. And we have a separate database of temples, which Professor Ganesh already mentioned. There are different ways in which information is being gathered and presented on the site. So one which Professor Ashish Pandey sir has already explained is reflecting the contemporary research that is happening. So the articles that were flashed here are published research papers by Professor Ashish Pandey, which have been reflected in the site. We also have scholars working on specific topics, like we have Ayurveda Vaidya, Dr. Devashri, who is working on concepts related to Ayurveda, not just giving the practical aspect as to what are the different types of treatment that is explained in the Ayurveda, but also exploring what is the relation of Ayurveda with the Bharatiya philosophy. What is the relation between Ayurveda and the Darshana Shastra? What is the interrelation between yoga and Ayurveda? How is your mental state of mind responsible in your health? That is explained in Prajna Paradha. What are the kind of food habits that you are supposed to follow? That is explained in Gramya Ahara. So one way is incorporating research papers. Second way is we have specific scholars working on specific subjects contributing research articles. And we also have articles on other sciences which are coming up slowly and steadily as we are trying to get in touch with scholars and students. That involves agriculture. We also have Professor Anil Kumar, who has contributed few articles on the Sthapatya Veda, enumerating the different kinds of formations used within a city. I would like to flash the article over here in brief, just one article so that you get an. So this is the article based on Kautilya Nagara Vyavastha. So this is based on the explanations given in Kautilya's Arthashastra. So what are the different ways of testing the land? What kind of land has to be used for what kind of construction? That has been explored in this article. We also have articles giving pictorial descriptions of what is explained in the Shastric Granthas, contributed by scholars and taken from published books. Another way in which we incorporate content is by referring to books of Bharatiya scholars who are working on integrating the ancient Indian science and the modern and giving it a comparison with the modern parlance. So we have articles by Professor so this is an article on Vaidika Kala Mapana, the time calculation as it reflects in the Vedas. So we are taking book publications and incorporating their findings over here. We have taken articles of Professor Ram Subramanian and his PhD research scholars. We also take references from recent Bharatiya research that has been happening, which find very less mention in other platforms. So this is how the work in Dharmawiki has been proceeding. Over to you, Professor.
I don't know if they're on mute. I'm not able to hear anybody.
Yeah. At this point of time, we'd be very happy to take questions. And there have been probably some questions on the
So
chat.
can you stop sharing? Let me make a few comments. So, so first of all, excellent presentation, very detailed, very thorough, and really, a lot of very important work is happening in building up this platform. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this platform is not any one person's property, but it has to become a shared resource for the Hindu community, a place of some measure of intellectual clarity, free from polemical argumentation, you know, uh, that throws light rather than heat, right? Now, it is my hope and aspiration that more and more people participate in the development of this platform, the expansion of this platform. Now, it is true that right now this platform is very committed to its Vedic, Shastric, Sanskritic foundations. Okay, and I think that's deliberate, because if you don't anchor it there, then you're ending up in a discourse that's informed more by Western translations, which is more or less where we are stuck on Wikipedia, for example, right? So we should translate. You can't get stuck in saying it's non-translatable. Okay, it is not translatable into equivalent words, and when you try to do simple, straightforward equivalent words, take one Sanskrit word and translate it into a single English equivalent word, you lose a lot more than you gain. But can it be made intelligible? Can the Sanskrit words be made intelligible in English? Yeah, definitely. But that requires writing an essay for every word, and it's not merely just a casual word for word translation, right? I mean, I just wanted to make that distinction, because we don't want to get stuck in it's not translatable at all, because in the end, we had to be intelligible in a contemporary world and relevant to the contemporary world. So the task of recovering the knowledge systems from the traditional Sanskritic world is a vast one, is a vast task. It's estimated that there are somewhere in the range of 10 to 30 million Sanskrit manuscripts and texts and so on. Many of them lie untranslated. But also the task of mapping that knowledge into a contemporary paradigm, so that there can be some kind of dialogue across the ancient paradigm and the contemporary paradigm. That also is a very important task, and it can be done until there is an adequate recovery of the knowledge systems of Bharat, basically, the Sanskritic knowledge systems of Bharat. So HUA from our end is very keenly interested in promoting and supporting this project. And I hope that our MA Sanskrit students, the current 2 batches were carrying on in the current batches, will get interested in this initiative and begin to participate in building up this database over time. And I expect this platform to be growing and growing and growing over the next 10, 20, 50 years or so. So with that, I'm going to ask Ankur to facilitate Q&A by picking up some questions from the Q&A box. Okay, please ignore the chat box. Go to Q&A box.
As he's doing that, just want to add, one of the topics which we didn't elaborate upon, which we flashed, was temples of India. Arun Jayaraman and Ayush Maheshwari, they are both, they've been students at IIT Bombay. Ayush is still a PhD student, and they've been working very actively. They created an entire application, an app for curating information on temples of India. So that's readily available for people to curate knowledge. And the organization of the knowledge on each temple is actually based on Shruti, Smriti, Agama, lots of text basically, right? And making that knowledge relevant in a contemporary context. Thanks. Just wanted to add, and the link was posted by Arun Jayaraman.
Yeah, other than the Ayush And Arun, I think we would also like to mention Mr. Aditya Agrawal ji, Shri Aditya Agrawal. He is a very experienced executive now pursuing PhD, and he is also in our team pursuing PhD as well as contributing very significantly to the Dharma Wiki.
Okay, so thank you for that amazing conversation. We got like 25 open questions. We're already at 10:05. There's a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to try and be quick. Samgupta asks, who is behind the biases against Dharma? We've covered this in a lot of different ways. It's a constellation of forces. There's so many different aspects of it: media, academics, cultural. That's why something like Dharma Wiki is so important. Next question. When will we take our past accomplishments to modern times and set up some institutions to meet modern needs at common level rather than for academicians? So like the question of, is this academic? Is this for the common people? What's the conversation between? I know we went into that a little bit, and our partnership kind of indicates how an academic institution like HUA can partner with an institution like Dharma Wiki to bridge that gap. But if anybody wants to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to add here. Deliberately, we actually spent some time talking about the mathematics curriculum. For example, even though there's a lot of research that is pumping into the curriculum we're talking about is not even grade 1, it's kindergarten level. So it's making the whole Indian mathematical system consumable by a small kid at the kindergarten level. So yes, at the same time, we realize that unless we have a postdoctoral level understanding of where we would like the knowledge to lead, right? So as we say, begin with the end in mind. So what is the end that we would like the child to be led to? Unless we articulate that, we have consensus and discussions around that. Often a kindergarten level article might again land in the same old trap that the Macaulayan system and other systems have led us to. So the goal is to have this walk on both these tracks, one kind of complementing or guiding the other. The temples of India, for example, is completely for common man. It has nothing to do with a very intellectual kind of discourse. At the same time, it has to be backed and supported by intellectual discourse. What are the fields we are interested in a temple? I mean, is temple just a place for worship? Is it a place for upliftment of the entire society? Isn't it a place also for annadanam? Isn't it a place for education? And how were they? Even now they're facilitated. It's interesting that even the Indian Meteorological Department, when they go to a village to set up the weather board, they prefer doing it at the temple in the village. It's just because people like to congregate around the temple. So there is a sentiment, but the sentiment has an underlying thought process inculcated for decades, or not decades, for generations. So it's important to also acknowledge that's what we mean by intellectual. Here, by intellectual, we don't mean really armchair speculation.
So let me pick up, suggestions like this. Why don't you call it Dharma Kosha, not Dharma Wiki, etc. I mean, these are all nice suggestions, but I think we've settled on a name already. Here is an interesting question from Satish Nayak. I'm going to generalize the question. Is there a governing council to approve the contents which can potentially eliminate any colonized or people with different motives? I suppose he's asking this with reference to Wikipedia. Not clear what the question is. Okay, so I think Satish, if you want to write it up again, please write it up. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, every such platform has an editorial function. Wikipedia has its own editorial function, right? It has rules, and it in its rules it eliminates edits proposed by Ganesh ji and Ashish Pandey ji and so on. In its rules, right? Whatever those rules are, which are hidden from our view. Dharma Wiki also has established an editorial function, so as to ensure that there is some amount of quality assurance that goes into articles. So while anybody can submit an article, anybody in this audience, you may submit an article, but as long as it goes through an appropriate editorial review, I suppose it can be published on Dharmawiki. So could you, Ashiji or Ganeshji, can you speak a little bit about your editorial
Yes.
function, how it's set up, etc.?
So if Kanakavali could go to the page, so if you go to the Dharma Wiki page, anyone can create an account and contribute article, exactly as what Kalyanji has mentioned. Kanakavali can flash that screen. At the same time, the Dharma point of view is what the codified set of rules, which again Kalyanji mentioned. Those are the rules that the moderators would look up to while either commenting on an article, discussing with the creator of the article, or at some and maybe editing, right, refining some parts of the article. So both the Dharma point of view, which are meant to guide editors, are publicly available, as also the fact that anyone can go and create an account. If Kanakavali can also flash that, anyone can go and create an account. So some of the suggestions coming in here, we are welcome. You are welcome to come and contribute articles. Please do. So, for example, there was a question: is it meant to be only an intellectual platform for research? No, I mean, if we get more hands, more people contribute, the platform will grow. And yes, if you also think that you have read up sufficiently, you like to become part of the moderators, please do let us know. We want to grow in every possible way, both contributors and basically moderators. What we have too much to deal with right now are suggestions. Right? So we have lots of suggestions. I mean, every second person will come and suggest, why don't you write articles on this? But what we really need are either people who contribute articles, moderate articles, or if you don't have time, you can sponsor scholars, because there's a Bharatiya Vidhan Parishad which has lots of scholars. Maybe, I mean, at times we've tried to call up upon them to contribute, but they also need to be compensated, because if they're giving sufficient time to contribute articles, we or even moderators, mostly as moderators, if not as direct contributors of text, we'll need to also take care of them, right? So in fact, many of the articles we wrote based on audio recordings of scholars. So not all scholars sit down and write. So you may know scholars who are fine just narrating, and you might want to sit down and type their narrations. So myriad ways in which you could contribute, but we need contributors.
So couple of things around that. Okay, can you kindly stop sharing again, please? Yeah. So I did invite the current batch of MA Sanskrit students from HUA to attend this. Fortunately, not many did, but I do intend for the Sanskrit students, as they graduate, to begin to develop an interest in systematically contributing from the HUA's side. As Ganeshji said, there are many traditional scholars in India, the Bharatiya Vidhan Parishad, for example, who can contribute even today. But as he said, they need to be compensated. So now, so as soon as you enter the world of compensation, there is this issue of fundraising. We have to constantly raise funds around the year to keep this platform up and running. So HUA has begun this collaboration. We have established a memorandum of understanding with IIT Bombay, where we will be making a small contribution on a monthly basis to keep this platform alive. And I only hope that that contribution increases over time. And therefore, right away, if anybody is interested in contributing to this initiative in the United States, one easy way to do it is to simply contribute to HUA and send us a little note saying this is for Dharmawiki, and it'll make its way there. Okay. So we need scholars and we need financial support to keep this platform up and running. All right, with that, let's go to a few more questions in the Q&A box. Okay. Will we be seeking funds? Yeah, we will like to seek, but it's a full-time job. We'd like to employ some people who can do fundraising on our behalf. So let's see. So questions like what is Dharma, what is yoga, etc. I'm going to skip, because this is not a webinar on trying to explain specific terms. And for those of you who are interested in those topics, kindly get engaged with HUA more fundamentally, and there are lots of courses on those topics.
And we encourage you to start with the Orientation to Hindu Studies course, where we background you and get you onboarded to the university and all the different projects and initiatives. So that's the first course you should enroll in, Orientation to Hindu Studies. I'll drop that in the link. Galanji, are there any particular questions you wanted
I want to pick up a couple of questions here, okay? So there is an interesting question here, and I'm going to articulate the spirit of the question rather than the letter of the question. So if an American, or a Hindu kid raised in US stumbles onto Dharma Wiki platform, right, and their orientation is primarily in English, and they don't have access to the Sanskrit words, how will this site be relevant for them, or appeal? How will it appeal to them? Is it exciting? Is it going to be exciting for someone like that, or are we targeting primarily an audience who's fundamentally interested in the Sanskritic, Shastric type of orientation?
Ashish ji?
One way of doing it through Dharma Wiki platform is we can create a small course, and from the content of the Dharma Wiki, and that can be the starting point. But that will be more like a one-way interaction. We see in many of such platforms and in many organizations, the real value emerges when we form the community. So in the Dharma Wiki, we can actually have one link to create a community, and that community can engage frequently at a certain period of time with a specific objective. HUA can be linked to that if the specific requirements are related to are very similar to what is being offered in the HUA courses, or if there is if there is a requirement of a very basic course, like the kid raised in the USA needs some orientation, that process can also be done in the form of creating an online community and meeting frequently, having some structured session combined with some indication, combined with some prompts about basic readings and some content.
Yeah, so I think I think the question pertains to will the site as it is laid out today, will it appeal easily to an primarily English-oriented audience, right? And I think I think it would be appropriate to say that that's an important question, and maybe needs a little bit more exploration. The bridging between the paradigm of knowledge based on Sanskrit and the paradigm of knowledge which is based on English. They are two different paradigms. See, in fact, the most striking illustration of these two paradigms was the two small snippets that Kanakavalli showed us on Ayurveda. From the Western paradigm, Ayurveda is a pseudoscience. See, it's not a science at all. But that's from a Western paradigm, because Western understanding of science. Why? Because Western understanding of science originates from observation to hypothesis, to inference, to hypothesis, to theory. What is primary is observation, measurement, what is visible to the human senses, what is available to the human senses. The Shastra goes the other way. It moves from the subtle to the gross, the sukshma to the stula. It's a whole different methodology of organizing knowledge. So they don't, the untranslatability is not just in a word. It is in the entire paradigm of knowledge which cannot be mapped from one to the other. So there's a gentleman called Mahindra. Somebody was asking, where are these Sanskrit scripts? Who are the authors? I mean, see, you have to get into this subject in much more detail to understand. You cannot throw around a question like that. There is an effort on the part of the government of India called the National Manuscript Mission, or the NAMAMI, which is trying to consolidate, at least minimally, an index, a national index of all the manuscripts that are available, at least within India. And they've already indexed some 4 million plus manuscripts, and they estimate that there are 10 million that they're going after, and there are more internationally. And there are other estimates which say there are 30 million texts and manuscripts in Sanskrit and so on. So who are these authors? What did they write about? What were these subjects? Is it all just obsolete? Should we just paint it all as obsolete and irrelevant for the contemporary times and discard them? Well, if you participate in the contemporary educational system, that's the position they're taking. If you read your contemporary history books, whether you read it in India or in the West, in California or in New Delhi, the uniform view is Sanskrit-based knowledge is obsolete and irrelevant, right? So we are engaged in a process of rediscovery. You can say it's a process of recovery, a process of restoration. It's like my analogy that I like to use here is, if a glass vase, a crystal glass vase, is shattered on the ground into 1 million pieces, into 30 million pieces, for example, and the pieces are all over the place. The task of recovering that vase is an extraordinary task of restoration and recovery. And in a certain sense, we as a civilization, the Hindu civilization, is at that point in time where it is beginning to reflect upon this process of recovery. And and unless one enters the world of Sanskrit in a very deep and profound way, this recovery will be inhibited, because you're going to engage with all the material from a Western orientation. Okay, so
I just want to add to this. We've also made one or two specific efforts to address this, palatability issue. So we are we have this Dharma Wiki newsletters, at least twice a month. Sometimes they are often more frequent. So we have these newsletters which are like digests of the articles created again with videos, often in a manner that you get an immediate glimpse into what the articles represent and how they are connected to the existing set of articles. So that's one thing I would request one and all here on this group to go on the Dharma Wiki site, and Kanakavali can show there's a simple button, right? Subscribe to the Dharma Wiki newsletter. That would at least keep us connected. And in fact, some of you might have been already receiving it. You probably got invited through the newsletter broadcast list. So there's a subscribe to Dharma Wiki. And we've been trying to come up with innovative ways in the past. I mean, around some of the Dharma Wiki articles, we have had conversations, which are also there on YouTube. Someone is asking questions to the person's set of people who created those articles. So if you could contribute to those, that will also be great. And yes, if you could contribute, that will be great.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Okay, the question is, are there any linkages between Wikipedia and Dharma Wiki? Are there links in Wikipedia that could direct the reader to Dharma Wiki on Hindu topics? Great question. Okay, I would say the answer is no. Isn't it? Because fundamentally, that is what the Wikipedia does not wish to do, right, Ashishji?
Yeah,
I mean, we are fine linking to Wikipedia for cricket articles, because we won't bother to write articles on cricket. But yes, beyond that,
no, it's the other way. It's the other way around, right, Ganeshji? It's not about Dharma Wiki linking to Wikipedia. Will we ever get to a point in time when Wikipedia links to Dharma Wiki? That's the question.
Okay.
I think we must try. This is more of a technical question, so I'm a least technical person over here, but I think we must give a try. Let's see, because as it happened with the content, let's see what happens to some of the links on the Wikipedia about Dharmawiki.
Yeah, so I think it's important that at some point in time, when we have built up Dharmawiki more comprehensively, right, that there should be an effort mounted to insert linkages to Dharmawiki from Wikipedia. May insert small comments, because it is a bit of a battleground, as Kurukshetra, as Ganeshji or Ashishji said at the very beginning. In some sense, the popularity of Dharmawiki, how much access Dharmawiki is able to generate, how much traffic it's able to generate, may be factors in whether such linkages are being allowed or not. But it's a very intriguing question, and one for the future. And we need to form teams of people who actually make that effort to get to link across the two. But I mean, we got a lot of work to do in building up the Dharmawiki platform to begin with already.
I mean, and we talked about it a little bit, but the Wikipedia platform has those communities already, the moderators, the chat groups, the back end, where they're by subject, by category. There's 10, 15 of them that are talking about it in the contentious articles. They have private conversations and they figure out between themselves what's being edited, what are they elevating. They're doing that. In some things, it's innocuous, right? It's just good people trying to do good work for something that they believe in. But in a lot of the places, especially when it comes to Hindu Dharma, who knows who's in the background editing this, and if it is nefarious people who are hijacking it, right? And it sometimes so we need to build that on our end, and that's exactly what HUA, this initiative, and so many other projects are. Thank you, Saumilji, for dropping the link to Hindu Studies, the orientation to Hindu Studies class in the chat. Kalyanji, we're at 10:26.
Yeah, we just got a few more questions. Let me take a couple more questions. So there's a very interesting question. Raj Bommakanti is saying, Google contributed $2 million to Wikipedia. Can we get anybody like that to contribute to Dharma Wiki? Well, you know what? We can certainly hope and pray that happens. There are many, many, many Hindu entrepreneurs and successful business people who can step up and contribute, provided they get over their hang-ups about being Hindu, and their struggle to be as secular as possible. So hopefully one of these days we will be able to find somebody who has the ability, the generosity, and the willingness to participate, and maybe it'll happen. Let's take a couple more questions here. Okay. Yeah. So why is Dharma Wiki? There's an interesting question. Why isn't Dharma Wiki showing up at the top in a Google search? Unless you actually look for Dharma Wiki, it is not showing up. So here is a related question. There's a lot of work that can be done in the realm of search engine optimization and keywords, and and a lot of other calibration that can make Dharma Wiki more visible than it is. So I wonder if we are making those kinds of efforts right now, or are we focused for the time being more on content creation and content curation, qualification, quality assurance, etc.?
So since I have worked in the area of relevance and ranking, there are lots of AI algorithms that are used there. The thing is, there's an entire citation network at play, right? So you cite popular articles and popular articles cite you. That's how your rankings go up. Now, if we quote Max Muller left, right, and center, and all the other well-read literature, people from Columbia and Harvard, that would probably come to your mind. We could probably improve our ranking. So the question is, do we fall for short-term goals, or do we try and improve the ecosystem overall? If there are tricks which are which won't hurt the long-term goals, we could probably adopt them. Ayush, who's my PhD student, has tried things. I mean, but I think there's no shortcut here. We'll have to develop that ecosystem, I mean, if we have Indian language search systems, certainly we can have an edge over a serious edge over other repositories. So I would say we should look also for alternatives, alternative ecosystem search engine where Dharmawiki could come out as a natural choice.
There is a question on copyright. Are there any intellectual property related issues, copyright related issues? This is a great question. Is all this work which is being done right now, hundreds of scholars working together. Ganesh, am I correct? There are more than 160 contributors to Dharmawiki at the current time. Am I right?
Yes, there have been more than 160 contributors. Not everyone has been active all the time, but cumulatively, all of them have contributed.
Yeah,
yes.
and we want to expand that, right? We do want, and
Absolutely.
we want to expand
Absolutely.
more and more people getting involved in this initiative, because it works only through the instrument of crowd sourcing, to use a contemporary word, right?
Right.
So the copyright, the intellectual property is currently being held by Bombay IIT. And Ashishji, maybe you can speak a little bit about, is there any vulnerability here associated with this, a security vulnerability? Yeah, please.
So just one point in general with there's this the commons, right? So Wiki subscribes to this commons where it doesn't belong to any specific entity. So that's how wikis operate. Right? So all the other wikis for domains, and there's a wiki how. So this is there's something called commons, right? That actually governs this. At the same time, the original author has to be always attributed. So therefore, you can't just copy paste from a particular article and claim your own authorship. So that's a protocol or an etiquette that is followed even with commons, right? At the same time, it's also required that the person who authors the article cites with the permission, of course, sometimes with the permission, if you're copy pasting exactly, or if you're not copy pasting exactly from another article, if you're just referring to that article, you can refer as many articles as you want. So there are some rules governing, how an author should write an article, the citation, copy pasting, and how the articles in Wiki or Dharma Wiki specifically here could be reused. But Ashish can also further add.
Yeah, so these are the excellent elaborations about the etiquettes of the academic writing, and even if it is open source, we need to acknowledge and we need to give the proper references. That's what we do all the time in the Dharma Wiki articles. As far as the articles concern its current form in the platform with particular IP address, technically it is open for everyone, but it is owned by IIT Bombay because it is part of a research project in IIT Bombay. However, as we go on with the collaborations, like we started with the HUA, in that collaboration, whenever some content is developed, it can be also jointly owned and put up in the public domain. So that's how it's a legal treatment of this content.
All right, terrific. I think on that note, right, we should conclude today. We passed our 90-minute mark. So Arun, Ankur, you can close the webinar.
Thank you all. It has been a pleasure. And the comments in the chat were so encouraging. You see the work that we're doing. You know that it's valuable. Please participate in whatever way you can. Join a class, donate money, show up to our free webinars, share with your friends and family and networks on social media and emails. We need you. Now's the time to get on board. We've got this momentum. We're putting this glass vase of Hindu culture and civilization back together, and you need to be a part of it. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Kalyanji, for leading this effort. See you at the next one. Namaste all.
Namaste.
Namaskar. Delighted to be a part of this
Namaste.
panel, and delighted to have such an amazing audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to all the people, HUA and the
Thank
audience.
you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Namaste.
Let me save the chat. All right. Goodbye all.